At Thanksgiving dinner, my son called me a useless old woman and hurled a turkey platter at me. My daughter-in-law smirked while gravy dripped from my hair. No one lifted a finger. I simply walked away, but something inside me hardened that day. They thought they'd broken me, but they only forged something new. Hear my story, like, share, and tell me where you're listening from. The aroma of roasted turkey, sage stuffing, and pumpkin pie usually filled Evelyn's home with warmth and nostalgia on Thanksgiving. At 65, a retired English teacher, she still took immense pride in hosting the annual family dinner, a tradition spanning over 4 decades in the very house she and her late husband, Arthur, had built their lives within. This year was no exception. For 3 days, Evelyn had poured her heart and soul into every detail, transforming her beloved home into a festive sanctuary. The kitchen, usually a quiet space since Arthur's passing 5 years prior, had buzzed with activity. Evelyn had meticulously peeled countless potatoes, chopped mountains of vegetables, and basted the 20-pound turkey to a golden, crispy perfection. Her hands, still nimble despite their age, had kneaded dough for homemade rolls and artfully arranged candied yams. The dining table, a grand, mahogany piece passed down through generations, was set with her cherished Royal Albert Old Country Roses china, each delicate floral pattern a testament to countless family gatherings. Polished silver gleamed under the soft glow of the chandelier, and linen napkins, ironed to crisp perfection, lay beside crystal wine glasses. For Evelyn, this wasn't just a meal. It was an act of love, a continuation of a legacy, and a tangible expression of her enduring place at the heart of her family. The early arrivals had been pleasant enough, but the festive atmosphere began to fray with the arrival of her only son, Daniel, and his wife, Chloe. Daniel, a man whose success in real estate often overshadowed his less admirable traits, stumbled slightly as he stepped through the threshold, his cheeks already flushed with an alarming crimson. The faint scent of whiskey preceded him, mixing unpleasantly with the festive spices of Evelyn's kitchen. Chloe, impeccably dressed as always, offered a thin-lipped smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, her gaze sweeping critically over the familiar, well-loved furniture, hinting at an unspoken judgment. Dinner began with forced cheer, the clinking of silverware and polite conversation masking a growing tension. Then, in a lull between courses, Daniel, his voice a little too loud, his words a little slurred, leaned forward. "Mom," he blurted without preamble, "when exactly are you going to sell this ridiculous house?" Evelyn felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. The abruptness, the dismissive tone, the public nature of the question, it was a slap in the face. She met his gaze, her own eyes unwavering. "Daniel, we've discussed this," she replied, her voice calm, though a tremor of hurt resonated beneath her composure. "This is my home. It has been for 40 years. I have no plans to sell it." Her home wasn't just bricks and mortar. It was the repository of every memory, every milestone, every comfort. It was the place where Arthur had planted his last rosebush, where Daniel himself had taken his first steps. Chloe, ever the opportunist, seized the moment. "Evelyn, darling," she cooed, her voice saccharine, "perhaps it's time to consider assisted living options. You're not getting any younger, and this house is simply too much for one person." The implication hung heavy in the air. Evelyn was old, incapable, a burden. And Evelyn's jaw tightened. Assisted living? A nursing home? She laughed, a short, sharp sound devoid of humor. "My dear, I am perfectly capable of caring for myself and my home. I walk 3 miles a day, I manage my finances, and I certainly don't need anyone telling me where to live. My independence is not up for discussion." Her voice, usually soft, now held an edge of steely resolve. Daniel scoffed, taking another gulp from his wineglass. "Your teacher's pension, Mom? That won't even cover the property taxes on this place, let alone upkeep. You need to be realistic." He had no idea. He never had. He wasn't aware of the careful, quiet investments Arthur had made over the years. The financial bedrock that Evelyn had carefully managed since his passing, ensuring her comfortable, independent future. It was a secret, a quiet strength she held, and Daniel's condescending assumptions stung deeply. Evelyn, trying to steer the conversation away from the precipice it teetered upon, gestured toward the large bay window through which the last rays of the autumn sun were fading. "I was just thinking about putting up the Christmas lights next week." she offered, attempting a lighter tone. The little ones always love them. Daniel merely waved his hand, dismissing her with a flick of his wrist. Mom, please, this is important. His face, already flushed, began to deepen to a dangerous scarlet. His eyes narrowed, fixed on her with an unpleasant intensity. Then his voice rose, raw and uncontrolled, echoing through the suddenly silent dining room. Go back to the nursing home, you useless old woman. The words hit Evelyn like a physical blow, stripping away years of maternal patience, of loving endurance. Before she could even register the depth of the insult, Daniel reached across the table, his hand wrapping around the large ceramic platter laden with the remains of the turkey, glistening gravy, and fragrant stuffing. With a guttural yell, he hurled it. Time seemed to slow. Evelyn saw the platter spinning through the air, gravy arcing in a grotesque trajectory, stuffing separating from the bone. It crashed against her chest with a wet thud, splattering hot gravy and soft seasoned breading across her dress, her hair, her face. A stray piece of turkey skin clung to her cheek like a grotesque ornament. The china platter, thankfully, remained intact, bouncing off her before landing with a dull clatter on the carpet. A stunned silence descended upon the room, thick and suffocating. Her young grandchildren, Clara and Ethan, who had been quietly eating, now stared wide-eyed, forks halfway to their mouths, their faces a mixture of confusion and fear. But Chloe, Evelyn noticed with a sickening lurch, wasn't shocked. A faint, almost imperceptible smirk played on her lips, a flicker of amusement in her cold eyes. No one moved, no one spoke. Not her grandchildren, too young to understand or intervene. Not her nieces and nephews, who averted their gazes, uncomfortable and unwilling to challenge Daniel. And certainly not Chloe. Evelyn felt the hot, sticky gravy drip down her chin, felt the damp warmth of the stuffing clinging to her hair. The humiliation was a raw, burning wound. Slowly, with as much dignity as she could muster, she rose from the table. Without a word, she turned and walked away, the squelch of gravy in her shoes the only sound as she ascended the stairs to her bedroom. In the quiet sanctuary of her room, as she peeled off the ruined dress, the initial shock gave way to something else entirely. Not tears, not even anger, not yet. Instead, a strange, cold calm settled over her. A realization dawned, stark and chilling. She would not be humiliated again. This was a line that had been crossed, a boundary irrevocably shattered. A hard, unyielding resolve began to solidify within her, like ice forming on still water. She washed her face, changed into a simple, clean dress, and looked at her reflection. Her eyes, usually gentle, now held a glint of steel. When she descended the stairs again, the noise of animated conversation drifted from the dining room. She found them, her family, her son, and his wife, still gathered around the table, eating, laughing, as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't just been subjected to a public assault in her own home. The sight was a punch to the gut. They weren't just indifferent, they were complicit in their silence. In that moment, watching them pretending, something inside Evelyn broke. But it wasn't her spirit that shattered. It was the last vestige of her innocent trust, of her blind loyalty. Something new, something sharp and dangerous was taking its place. The week following Thanksgiving dragged by in a disorienting haze for Evelyn. The vivid, humiliating memory of Daniel's outburst and the splattering turkey platter replayed itself endlessly in her mind, a cruel loop of injustice. She found herself moving through her days in a fog, performing routine tasks with an almost mechanical detachment, her heart heavy with a profound sense of betrayal. The cheerful holiday decorations now seemed a bitter mockery, their brightness unable to pierce the gloom that had settled deep within her. The house, once a sanctuary of cherished memories, now felt tainted, a stage for her public humiliation. One crisp Tuesday afternoon, as Evelyn was quietly reading in the living room, shielded by the large wingback chair, she heard the unmistakable sound of her front door opening. A faint click, then footsteps. Daniel and Chloe. Her car, unfortunately, was at the garage for a scheduled service. A minor detail she realized they must have overlooked or simply assumed meant she was out. A sudden instinctual wave of caution washed over her. Instead of announcing her presence, Evelyn remained still, an uneasy tension tightening her muscles. She heard their hushed voices, growing closer, then fading as they entered Arthur's old study, a room Evelyn rarely used now, a relic of her late husband's industrious, private world. Evelyn held her breath, straining to hear. The faint murmur of their voices, conspiratorial and low, prickled her skin. Then, Chloe's voice, sharp and clear despite its hushed tone, cut through the silence. "The sooner we get her into Cedar Grove, the better," she stated, her words like a cold knife. "I spoke with the admissions coordinator. There's an opening next month if we act quickly." Cedar Grove. Evelyn's blood ran cold. It was one of those sprawling, immaculate assisted living facilities she occasionally saw advertised on television, promising serene golden years in a resort-like setting. But for Evelyn, it was a gilded cage, a place for those who could no longer manage their lives. The thought sent a shiver down her spine. "Mom won't go willingly," Daniel replied, his voice still low but laced with a hint of irritation. "You saw how she reacted at Thanksgiving. She's stubborn." "Stubborn or demonstrating diminished capacity?" Chloe countered, a chilling suggestion in her tone. "We just need to document a few more incidents. Show how she's struggling with independent living. A few more episodes like her meltdown over the Christmas lights, or her forgetting things." Evelyn gripped the arms of her chair, her knuckles white. Meltdown? Forgetting things? She had not forgotten anything, nor had she had a meltdown. She had merely tried to change the subject, to introduce some light into their oppressive conversation. But in Chloe's twisted narrative, everything was fodder for their machinations. "Once we have enough, we can present it to the solicitor. Invoke that power of attorney she signed all those years ago." A surge of nausea twisted Evelyn's stomach. The power of attorney. Years ago, in a moment of foresight and trust, she had signed a document granting Daniel power of attorney over her affairs, a precaution in case of genuine incapacitation. She had trusted him, trusted her son, implicitly. Now, that trust was being weaponized against her, twisted into a tool for her incarceration, her forced removal. She was nowhere near incapacitated. She was vibrant, independent, and perfectly sound of mind. "The house should sell quickly," Daniel continued, oblivious to his mother's proximity, his voice already moving on to the spoils of their plan. "Prime location, good bones, good. Easily fetch 700,000, maybe even more with a few minor upgrades. And once we pay for the Cedar Grove entrance fee," Chloe chimed in, her voice now barely concealing a triumphant glee, "the rest is ours. We can finally get those kitchen renovations and that European vacation we've been dreaming of." Evelyn's knees nearly buckled. Her home, her cherished home, the bedrock of her existence, reduced to a mere number, a commodity to fund their lavish desires. They didn't want what was best for her. They wanted her out, her assets liquidated, her life dismantled for their financial gain. The realization was a devastating blow, far more brutal than any flung turkey platter. It was a cold, calculated betrayal of the deepest kind. Daniel, ever the pragmatist, added, "Her pension will cover the monthly fees at Cedar Grove too, and the excess, we can put that towards Ethan's college fund." Ethan, her beloved grandson. Her pension, her rightful income would be siphoned off, and only a fraction, the excess, would go towards a future for her grandson. It was a cruel irony, using her own resources to fund her displacement and their enrichment, all while maintaining an illusion of benevolence. Chloe then lowered her voice further, but Evelyn's ears, sharpened by shock and fear, caught every word. "We should start gradually moving out some of the more valuable items now. The antique silver, your mother's pearls, some of the paintings, she won't even notice." Evelyn felt a tremor run through her body, a violent shiver that had nothing to do with the chill in the air. This was not just about money, it was about erasing her, meticulously dismantling her life, piece by piece. She pushed herself up from the chair, her legs unsteady, and retreated silently towards the kitchen, the sounds of their plotting fading behind her. She leaned against the cool counter, her breath coming in ragged gasps, her hands shaking uncontrollably. The cold reality of their betrayal settled over her, a dark shroud. Her son, her daughter-in-law were plotting to steal her home, her independence, her very life, all under the guise of concern for her welfare. Just as she was trying to compose herself, the study door opened, and Daniel's voice, suddenly bright and cheerful, pierced the air. "Mom, you're home. We just stopped by to check on you, make sure you're all right after Thanksgiving. Heard your car was in the shop." His feigned concern was a grotesque mask, a stark contrast to the venomous words she had just overheard. Evelyn forced a weak smile, her mind racing, a hurricane of emotions swirling within her. That evening, unable to shake the chilling conversation, Evelyn found herself drawn to Arthur's old study. The air in the room, usually heavy with the scent of old books and leather, now felt charged with a different energy, a new purpose. She remembered something Arthur had once said, a half-joking remark about having a rainy day fund hidden somewhere she'd never look. She began to search, her fingers tracing the spines of his antique books, running along the underside of his desk. And then, tucked away behind a loose panel in the back of a rarely opened filing cabinet, she found it. A small, heavy, fireproof box. Inside, carefully organized, were documents she had never seen. Stock certificates, bond statements, and meticulously detailed records of substantial investments. It was a secret nest egg Arthur had built, an unspoken testament to his lifelong care for her, far exceeding anything she or Daniel had ever imagined. In that moment, surrounded by the quiet hum of her home, Evelyn realized she was not only financially independent, she was wealthy. And with that realization came a potent surge of power, a cold, hard resolve to fight for her home, her dignity, and her future. The contents of Arthur's fireproof box were nothing short of a revelation. Evelyn spent the rest of that evening poring over the documents, her heart racing with a mixture of shock and dawning empowerment. Stock certificates, bond statements, mutual fund records, all meticulously kept, all surprisingly substantial. Arthur, ever the quiet provider, had built a formidable financial fortress, a nest egg she had no idea existed. As she tallied the figures, a staggering sum emerged, close to $1 million in liquid assets, not even including the value of the house itself. Evelyn was not just financially secure, she was independently wealthy. The insidious whispers of Daniel and Chloe, their condescending assumptions about her dwindling pension, suddenly evaporated, replaced by a fierce sense of vindication. They had underestimated her, and more importantly, they had profoundly underestimated Arthur's silent legacy. The very next morning, a newfound determination fueled Evelyn. She called her bank requesting an immediate appointment with their senior financial advisor. The meeting was brief but productive. The advisor confirmed the robust health of Arthur's portfolio, outlining strategies for managing her newfound wealth and ensuring a comfortable, worry-free future. Evelyn listened, absorbed, a plan already beginning to coalesce in her mind. Her next call was to Sarah Green, a local real estate agent she had known for decades, a trustworthy woman who had sold Evelyn and Arthur their first home and later helped her navigate the sale of a small investment property. "Sarah," Evelyn began, her voice steady, a crispness to it that hadn't been there in years. "I'd like to sell my house, quietly and quickly." She emphasized the words, "Discretion is paramount." Sarah naturally was surprised. "Evelyn, are you sure? This house has so much history for you." "I am quite sure, Sarah," Evelyn replied, her resolve always unwavering. "And I don't want any for sale signs or open houses. Just quiet inquiries." Sarah, sensing the underlying urgency and unusual request, nodded. "Of course, Evelyn, I can list it privately within my network. That will minimize publicity and attract serious buyers who appreciate your privacy." Evelyn felt a flicker of relief. This was the first concrete step in her new plan, a strategic maneuver against the betrayal that had sought to corner her. Leaving Sarah's office, a sense of power surged through Evelyn, a feeling she hadn't experienced in years. It was exhilarating, almost intoxicating. She reflected on how subtly, insidiously, she had allowed Daniel to dictate the terms of their relationship, to diminish her, to treat her with thinly veiled contempt. She had dismissed his occasional barbs, excused his dismissive attitude, attributed it to stress or his demanding career. But the Thanksgiving incident and the subsequent discovery of his monstrous plot with Chloe had stripped away all illusions. "No more," Evelyn vowed aloud, the words a silent promise to herself as she gripped the steering wheel. "They thought I was a feeble old woman, easily manipulated, ready for the scrap heap. They were about to discover how wrong they were." A cold, hard resolve set in, transforming her grief and hurt into a formidable strength. This wasn't about revenge in the petty sense. It was about reclaiming her dignity, her autonomy, and showing them the true cost of their avarice and disrespect. For the next week, Evelyn lived a double life. To Daniel and Chloe, she maintained a facade of normalcy, perhaps even a touch more subdued than usual, playing the role of the slightly frail, slightly confused elderly mother. She offered vague answers when Daniel probed about her health or her future plans, never giving him anything concrete to latch onto. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, she was a whirlwind of quiet activity, meticulously planning her escape and preparing for the grand unveiling of her countermove. She organized her papers, sorted through belongings, and made a list of essentials she would take with her. Then the call came from Sarah. "Evelyn, you won't believe this. I've had an offer. A couple, the Hendersons. They absolutely adore the house. Full asking price, all cash, and they're incredibly flexible on the closing date, within 3 weeks if you're ready, but they can wait longer if needed." Tears, hot and unexpected, pricked Evelyn's eyes. Not tears of sadness, but of a profound relief and a bittersweet pang for the home she had loved so deeply. The Hendersons' appreciation for the house, for Arthur's painstaking restoration work over the years, felt like a balm to her bruised soul. It would go to someone who cherished it, not someone who saw it merely as a means to fund a kitchen renovation and a European vacation. "I'd like to show it to them again," Evelyn told Sarah, her voice thick with emotion. "Perhaps next Wednesday? Daniel never visits on Wednesdays." She had learned their patterns, their routines, their convenient absences. She would use them to her advantage. As the sale progressed, Evelyn began to seriously consider her next move. Where would she go? The prospect of moving felt less daunting now, more like an adventure. Then a name floated to the surface of her memory: Brenda Jenkins, her spirited college roommate from Florida. Brenda, with her infectious laugh and boundless energy, had always encouraged Evelyn to live a little. Evelyn found Brenda's number and, with a hopeful trepidation, dialed. Brenda's voice, warm and familiar, instantly brought a smile to Evelyn's face. After catching up on years of missed details, Evelyn confessed her situation, recounting the chilling plot of Daniel and Chloe. Brenda listened intently, her outrage palpable even over the phone. "Evelyn, you come straight down here," Brenda declared without hesitation. "I have a spare room in Sunshine Village that's just perfect. You can stay for as long as you want it, my dear. We'll have a blast. You need some sunshine, literally and figuratively." A wave of profound gratitude washed over Evelyn. "Brenda, that's incredibly kind. Yes, I think I'd like that very much." She smiled, picturing palm trees and warm ocean breezes. "I'll need about 3 weeks, just enough time to tie up some loose ends here." Brenda understood. The loose ends Evelyn referred to were not simply logistical. They were deeply personal, tangled threads of betrayal that needed to be neatly, decisively severed. With the promise of Brenda's spare room and the prospect of a new beginning, Evelyn channeled her nervous energy into meticulous planning. The betrayal had ignited a fire within her, transforming her grief into purposeful action. She created a detailed list, a battle plan of sorts, to dismantle her old life and seamlessly transition into her new one. First on the list, a reputable moving company for the few cherished items she would take with her. Then, sorting through decades of accumulated possessions, deciding what to donate, what to discard, changing her mailing address, arranging for bank transfers of her newfound wealth, and critically, at the top of her legal priorities, updating her will. Her initial will, drafted years ago, had designated Daniel and Chloe as primary beneficiaries, particularly for the proceeds of the house. That was no longer an option. Evelyn now envisioned a trust, carefully structured for Clara and Ethan, her beloved grandchildren. They were innocent in their parents' machinations, and she wanted to ensure their futures were secure, unburdened by the consequences of Daniel and Chloe's greed. This wasn't about spite, it was about justice and protection. The Hendersons returned to view the house that Wednesday, accompanied by Sarah. They were a lovely couple in their 40s, with 2 well-behaved teenage children who quietly followed, clearly respecting the home's serene atmosphere. As Evelyn guided them through the rooms, explaining the history of certain architectural details or the origin of a particular antique. She felt an unfamiliar confidence bloom within her. The Hendersons weren't just buyers, they were genuinely appreciative. They admired Arthur's painstaking craftsmanship and in the built-in bookshelves of the library and Chloe's critical assessment of the outdated kitchen. They saw the house not as a stepping stone to financial gain, but as a home, a sanctuary to raise their own family. Miss Hayes, Mr. Henderson said, turning to her in the sun-drenched living room, "We're truly taken with this house. We'd like to make this official. How soon would you be comfortable closing? Would 2 weeks be too ambitious?" Evelyn, surprised by her own composure, met his gaze. "2 weeks sounds perfectly acceptable, Mr. Henderson," she replied, her voice steady, betraying none of the internal turmoil she'd experienced days before. A small smile touched her lips. This was moving faster than she had dared hope, accelerating her escape route. Sarah, sensing the shift in Evelyn, gave her a discreet, encouraging nod. That evening, the phone rang. It was Daniel. "Mom," he began, his voice surprisingly amiable. "Chloe and I were thinking of coming over for Sunday dinner. There's something important we need to discuss with you." Evelyn's internal alarm bells chimed. Something important. She knew exactly what that meant. The assisted living options, the diminished capacity, the subtle coercion to sign herself away to Cedar Grove. A wave of bitterness washed over her, quickly followed by a cold resolve. She would play their game, just for a little longer. "Oh, Daniel, how lovely!" Evelyn feigned warmth, her voice light and welcoming. "Of course. I'll make your favorite pot roast." The deception tasted sour in her mouth, but it was necessary. She needed to maintain the illusion of a docile, amenable mother, lulling them into a false sense of security. She would be an open book, a blank slate, until the moment she wasn't. The following days were a blur of calculated actions. Evelyn called the moving company, securing their services for the day after the new expedited closing date. She contacted a local women's shelter, arranging for them to pick up the majority of her furniture and household items, knowing they would provide comfort to those truly in need, unlike her greedy children. It was a silent act of defiance, ensuring Daniel and Chloe would never get their hands on a single piece of her past. She made an appointment to close her local bank accounts, transferring the remaining funds to her new discrete account managed by the financial advisor, all set to be accessed in Florida. With each completed task, the reality of her plan became more tangible, more irreversible. There were moments, of course, when doubt crept in. Was she truly doing the right thing? Was she overreacting? The weight of severing ties with her only son, with her grandchildren, even if for a purpose, was immense. The ghost of Arthur's disapproving frowns sometimes flickered in her mind. Then she would remember. She would recall Daniel's red, contorted face, his cruel words, "Useless old woman." She would replay the sickening thud of the turkey platter, the sticky gravy clinging to her skin, and Chloe's amused smirk. She would remember their hushed, calculating voices in Arthur's study, dissecting her life, planning her institutionalization, eager to strip her of her home and her dignity, all for a kitchen renovation and a European vacation. They had shown her no mercy, no empathy, only avarice and contempt. "No," Evelyn concluded, her voice a firm whisper in the quiet of her empty-feeling house. "No, I wasn't overreacting. I was finally standing up for myself. This isn't just about revenge, it's about survival. It's about dignity." And with that renewed conviction, she pushed forward, her resolve hardening with every step toward her new, independent future. The pot roast would be ready for Sunday dinner, a final, delicious act in her elaborate farewell. If you're finding Evelyn's story as gripping as I am, don't forget to hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe to catch all the twists and turns of this incredible journey. You won't want to miss what happens next. Sunday arrived, cloaked in a deceptive tranquility that matched Evelyn's own carefully constructed facade. Daniel and Chloe pulled into the driveway, emerging from their gleaming car with smiles plastered on their faces, smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes, betraying a calculated eagerness. Evelyn greeted them at the door with a warmth she didn't feel, guiding them into the familiar comfort of her home, a home she was meticulously preparing to leave. The pot roast, Daniel's childhood favorite, filled the dining room with a savory aroma. Evelyn served generous portions, her hands steady, her conversation light, mostly consisting of benign small talk about the unseasonably mild weather and local happenings. Daniel and Chloe, meanwhile, engaged in overly polite chatter, their eyes occasionally darting around the room, assessing, calculating, like predators circling their prey. Evelyn observed them, her senses heightened, every word, every gesture, a piece of the puzzle she was assembling. She noted Chloe's almost imperceptible nod to Daniel, a signal that dinner was concluded, and it was time for the important discussion. After the last crumb of apple pie had been consumed and the coffee cups cleared, Daniel pushed back his chair, clearing his throat with theatrical solemnity. "Mom," he began, his voice laced with manufactured concern, "Chloe and I have been very worried about you lately. Living in this big house all alone. It must be getting overwhelming." Chloe, ever the prepared accomplice, pulled a glossy brochure from her elegant handbag. It was thick, heavy stock, adorned with idyllic photographs of smiling seniors enjoying manicured gardens and sparkling swimming pools. "We found this wonderful place, Evelyn," she announced, her voice sweet as honey. "Cedar Grove. It's not a nursing home, darling. It's a luxury retirement village. Independent living, but with all the amenities. Activities, chef-prepared meals, round-the-clock security, absolute peace of mind." She slid the brochure across the polished table toward Evelyn. Evelyn picked it up, her fingers tracing the smooth, laminated cover. She pretended to examine the photographs with keen interest, her expression carefully neutral, masking the surge of indignation that threatened to consume her. The irony was palpable. They were presenting her future, a future they had meticulously planned for her, without her consent, without her knowledge, while she was actively orchestrating her own, very different future. "We've even gone ahead and put down a refundable deposit to hold an apartment for Daniel added, a note of triumph in his voice, as if this was an act of great generosity, not a calculated step in his scheme. "Just to secure a spot. They're quite popular." Evelyn nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on a picture of a woman enjoying a yoga class. "I see," she murmured, allowing a hint of thoughtful contemplation to color her tone. Daniel leaned forward, adopting a paternal air. "It just makes financial sense, Mom. This house is a money pit. The maintenance, the taxes, it's just not practical for one person. At Cedar Grove, your expenses would be predictable, all-inclusive." Chloe chimed in. "And think of the company, Evelyn. You'd have the bridge clubs, art classes, movie nights. Everything would be taken care of for you. No more worries about yard work or leaky roofs." Her words painted a picture of carefree bliss, a life of leisure Evelyn was supposedly desperate for. Evelyn, maintaining her carefully constructed facade of a woman weighing her options, looked up from the brochure. "And what about the house?" she asked, her voice quiet, almost hesitant. "What would happen to it, precisely?" It was the question they had been waiting for, the moment to reveal the true prize. Daniel, ever smooth, seized the opportunity. "We'd help you sell it, of course," he replied, his eyes gleaming with barely suppressed eagerness. "Sarah Green would be perfect for that. The proceeds would more than cover the entrance fee for Cedar Grove and leave you with a nice nest egg, Mom, something for your comfort, your little indulgences." He paused, letting the words sink in, confident in his narrative. "I see," Evelyn said again, her tone even, betraying nothing. She closed the brochure, placing it gently on the table. "I appreciate you thinking of me, Daniel, Chloe. It's a lot to take in. Let me consider it." Daniel and Chloe exchanged a quick, triumphant glance. They were clearly surprised and immensely pleased by her apparent receptiveness. They had expected resistance, perhaps even another outburst like Thanksgiving. Her calm demeanor, her seemingly thoughtful consideration, was exactly what they wanted. They believed they had won. As they rose to leave, Daniel squeezed Evelyn's shoulder, a gesture that once would have conveyed affection, but now felt like a predatory claim. "You're making the right decision, Mom," he said, his voice full of false reassurance. "You'll be so much happier there. We both know it." Evelyn offered them a serene smile, a silent goodbye. She stood on her porch, waving gently as their car pulled away, watching them disappear down the street. Her smile remained, but her eyes held a spark of knowing, of cold determination. They thought they had outsmarted her. They thought she was a senile old woman, easily manipulated. They were entirely wrong. A quiet thrill ran through Evelyn. In precisely 10 days, her beloved home would no longer belong to her, but to the kind, appreciative Hendersons. And in 10 days, she would be far away, basking in the Florida sunshine with Brenda, light years away from Daniel, Chloe, and their gilded cage at Cedar Grove. The final act was almost at hand. The 2 weeks that followed were a whirlwind of quiet, deliberate activity for Evelyn. She moved through her home with a newfound purpose, a calm determination guiding her every action. Each morning, she rose before dawn, fueled by strong coffee and a singular focus. Sorting through 65 years of accumulated possessions was a profound exercise, revealing not only the weight of her past, but also the surprising lightness of her future. She realized, with a clarity that surprised her, how little she truly needed to carry forward. Most items held sentimental value, but no practical purpose in her new life. Among her treasures, Evelyn carefully selected her wedding china, the delicate Royal Albert set that had graced countless family Thanksgivings. She couldn't bear the thought of it falling into Daniel and Chloe's hands, perhaps to be pawned off as part of their kitchen renovation fund. Instead, she made discreet arrangements to store it securely, intending to pass it on to Clara when her granddaughter was older, a tangible link to a more genuine family history. Next, Evelyn visited her attorney, David Miller. She laid out her situation with calm precision, detailing Daniel and Chloe's plot, the Thanksgiving humiliation, and her firm decision to sell the house and remove Daniel as the primary beneficiary of her estate. David listened intently, his expression shifting from surprise to grave concern. "Evelyn," he cautioned, his brow furrowed, "Daniel could potentially contest this. If he were to claim you are not of sound mind, it could complicate things significantly." Evelyn, however, was prepared. "Then I'd like to request an independent psychological evaluation," she stated, her voice unwavering. "I am perfectly lucid, David, and I want that documented officially." David, impressed by her foresight, moved quickly. By Wednesday evening, Evelyn had undergone a thorough assessment, confidently answering every question, proving her mental acuity beyond doubt. The results, confirming her full capacity, were swiftly added to her legal file. With that hurdle cleared, her updated will was finalized, reflecting her new intentions to create a trust for Clara and Ethan, ensuring her grandchildren's future without enriching their manipulative parents. The house closing was set for the very next morning. Most of her belongings were either packed for the move to Florida or donated to the women's shelter, leaving her home feeling strangely hollow, yet also liberated. On her last evening in the house, Evelyn wandered through the empty rooms, a poignant farewell. Each space held echoes of a lifetime. The living room where Arthur had read to her by the fire. The dining room vibrant with Christmases past. The master bedroom where they had shared their quiet intimacies and where he had spent his last days. A wave of bittersweet nostalgia washed over her, but it was tinged with resolve, not regret. She paused at her dresser, picking up the small gold locket Arthur had given her on their 10th anniversary. She fastened it around her neck, its cool metal a comforting weight, carrying the tiny photo of their younger, happier selves close to her heart. She found herself drawn to Arthur's study, the room that had unknowingly held the key to her financial freedom and the chilling truth of Daniel's character. Her gaze fell upon his worn, leather-bound journal, tucked away on a shelf. She had never read it, always respecting it as his private space, a testament to his innermost thoughts. But now, after all she had uncovered, a new compelling urge pushed her to open it. Her fingers trembled slightly as she turned the brittle pages. The elegant script, so familiar yet unseen, began to tell a story. An entry from 1990 caught her eye, revealing Arthur's quiet worries about Daniel's growing selfishness and apparent lack of ambition, his tendency to expect handouts rather than earn his way. A lump formed in Evelyn's throat. Further on, an entry from 2005 detailed Daniel's expectation for them to provide the full down payment for his first house, framed not as a request, but as an entitlement. Arthur had meticulously documented it as a loan, something Evelyn had not been aware of, a silent testament to his foresight and his quiet struggle with his son's character. Arthur had seen it all along, the subtle shifts, the growing entitlement, the self-serving nature of their son. Evelyn's heart ached with a mixture of sadness for Arthur's quiet burden and a profound understanding. Her husband, in his gentle wisdom, had been preparing her for this long before she even knew she needed it. The realization brought tears to her eyes, not of weakness, but of connection and a deep, abiding gratitude. The closing went smoothly the next morning. The Hendersons, genuine and warm, not only expressed their excitement, but also presented Evelyn with a thoughtful parting gift, a gift certificate to a local nursery. "For your next garden, wherever it may be," Mrs. Henderson said, her smile kind. It was a gesture of respect and hope that touched Evelyn deeply, a stark contrast to the greed she had so recently faced. Later that day, as Evelyn supervised the last of the movers, her phone rang. It was Daniel. "Mom, just checking in. I was thinking of stopping by this afternoon, maybe help you pack up some things." His feigned helpfulness was almost comical. "Oh, that's sweet of you, dear," Evelyn replied, her voice maintaining its practiced pleasantness. "But the movers are just finishing up. There's really nothing left to pack. Why don't you and Chloe come for a Sunday dinner again?" "Next Sunday, same time. There are still a few things I'd like to discuss with you both then." She needed to set the stage for their final surprise. Daniel naturally agreed, oblivious to the fact that his useless old woman would no longer be in the house, nor in the city, when he arrived. The final hours in her home were a kaleidoscope of emotion for Evelyn. She meticulously checked every closet, every drawer, ensuring nothing was left behind, nothing that Daniel or Chloe could exploit. Her rental car, a compact sedan, sat outside packed with a few carefully chosen suitcases and a small box of irreplaceable mementos: the gold locket, a cherished photo album, Arthur's journal. She surveyed the emptying rooms, a faint smile playing on her lips. By Sunday at 5 p.m., she knew she would be halfway to Florida, 1,000 miles away from the drama she was leaving behind, and Daniel would finally face the consequences of his greed. That evening, as dusk settled, casting long, familiar shadows, Evelyn walked through each room one last time. She lingered by the fireplace, remembering crackling fires and whispered secrets. She stood in the doorway of the kitchen, recalling countless meals prepared with love. In the garden, she touched the last hardy roses, a silent goodbye to a lifetime of memories woven into the very fabric of the house. Sitting on the porch swing, its gentle creak a familiar lullaby, a profound sense of peace settled over her. It was a strange mix of poignant farewell and exhilarating anticipation. Tomorrow would bring a new beginning, a life reclaimed, unburdened by expectations or manipulation. Her phone buzzed, a text from Brenda. "Almost there. Can't wait for your new adventure." Evelyn smiled, the message a warm reassurance, a confirmation of the exciting path ahead. She made herself a final cup of tea, the comforting ritual, a steady anchor in the sea of change. As she hummed softly, a forgotten tune from her youth, she felt a powerful, almost terrifying, yet exhilarating hope for the future. Friday morning dawned bright and clear, matching Evelyn's spirits. She calmly supervised the movers, who looked somewhat puzzled by her surprisingly small load. "Downsizing quite dramatically," Evelyn explained with a wry smile, enjoying the double meaning, the secret knowledge that made her words resonate with a deeper truth. Before she left, Evelyn carefully placed a bottle of fine wine on the kitchen counter for the Hendersons, a small token of gratitude and welcome. On the mantelpiece in the living room, in a place Daniel would surely notice, she laid a sealed envelope. It was addressed to him. The letter inside was short, concise, and utterly devoid of emotion. It read, "Dear Daniel, I have sold the house and moved away. Please do not try to find me. I am well and have no need of your assistance. I know about your plans for Cedar Grove. I know about your intentions to sell my home and claim the proceeds for yourselves. I know everything. I raised you better than this, Mom." She read it one last time, a tear finally escaping and tracing a path down her cheek. It was not a tear of sadness, but of closure, of a finality that felt both heavy and liberating. With a deep breath, Evelyn locked the front door, the familiar click resonating through the silent house. She placed the key under the mat, a small gesture for the Hendersons, who would soon make this house their own. Then she stepped into her rental car, leaving behind the only home she had known for 40 years. Her first stop was the bank, where she closed her local accounts, securing the substantial proceeds from the house sale and her carefully managed investments. Then, a quick visit to the post office to finalize her mail forwarding to Brenda's address in Florida. Her last, most personal stop was Arthur's grave. The marble headstone, etched with his name in a simple epitaph, stood peacefully under a spreading oak tree. Evelyn placed a bouquet of bright yellow roses, Arthur's favorite, at the base. "Goodbye, my love," she whispered, a gentle breeze rustling through the leaves above. "I think you would understand. I'm finally putting myself first, just as you always wanted me to." She lingered for a moment, feeling his quiet presence, a comforting warmth, before turning and walking away, leaving him to rest in peace. By 2:00 p.m., Evelyn was on the interstate heading south. With every mile that passed, she felt lighter, the weight of betrayal and deceit slowly lifting from her shoulders. She allowed herself a moment to reflect on Daniel's likely reaction. The initial anger and the disbelief, the dawning horror of lost inheritance. She knew he would feel entitled, wronged, but she pushed the thought away. It was no longer her burden. Later that night, in a roadside hotel room, Evelyn retrieved Arthur's journal. She opened it, turning to a page she hadn't yet read. His neat script filled the page. "Evelyn My Inns," he had written, using his private pet name for her, "gives too much of herself. She sees the best in everyone, even when it's not there. Everyone takes, and she keeps giving. I worry what will happen to her when I'm gone." Reading those words, Evelyn finally understood the full depth of Arthur's love and his quiet concern. He had known her for Namar, truly known her, better than anyone. And now she was finally honoring his unspoken wish, finally putting herself first. The road to freedom lay open before her, vast and promising. Sunday at 5:00 p.m., Evelyn smiled, picturing it vividly as she drove, the Florida coastline now a tantalizing whisper in the warm breeze. Daniel and Chloe arriving with their forced smiles and their pot roast expectations. The new car in the driveway, certainly not hers. The locked door. The curious Hendersons, perhaps already unpacking, ready to greet their son and daughter-in-law to their new home. And then, the discovery of her letter on the mantelpiece. Evelyn imagined Daniel's face, red with fury, then disbelief, then a dawning comprehension as he read her concise, factual words. His perfectly laid plans, she knew, had backfired spectacularly, leaving him with nothing but a bitter taste of his own making. As she drove the final stretch towards Sunshine Village, a wave of complex emotions washed over Evelyn. There was no malice, no triumphant glee. Instead, a profound sadness for the broken relationship with her son, a quiet grief for the family that could have been. But woven through that sadness was also a fierce determination, a resolute satisfaction in having reclaimed her dignity and her life. This wasn't about revenge, it was about self-preservation, about finally drawing a line. 1 year later, Evelyn sat on the private balcony of her cozy condominium, watching a vibrant Florida sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple. Her new life in Sunshine Village had not just begun, it had flourished. The vibrant community had welcomed her with open arms. She had made a close circle of friends, women with stories as rich and varied as her own. She joined the community chorus, her clear alto voice adding harmony to weekly rehearsals, and found immense joy volunteering at a local elementary school, reading stories to delighted children, a return to her teaching roots that felt profoundly fulfilling. Her condominium, though smaller than her grand old house, was perfect. It was hers, purchased outright with a fraction of Arthur's secret investments, ensuring her complete financial independence. There were no mortgages, no property taxes to worry about, no leaky roofs or demanding upkeep. She had even found unexpected companionship with George Thompson, a charming and witty retired history professor who shared her love of books and long walks on the beach. He brought a gentle, intellectual warmth into her life, a different kind of love that was both comfortable and exciting. Daniel, of course, had tried to find her. In the initial weeks, her phone had buzzed relentlessly with his calls, each message angrier, more confused, full of accusations and thinly veiled threats. Evelyn, following David Miller's advice, had calmly blocked both Daniel and Chloe, cutting off their access to her. But Daniel, resourceful in his own way, eventually tracked her down through Sarah, the realtor. He appeared one afternoon at the gates of Sunshine Village, his face flushed with anger, his eyes blazing. He confronted her in the community's manicured courtyard, his voice booming. "You sold our family home without even telling me," he shouted, drawing curious glances from other residents. "How could you do that, Mom? That was my inheritance." Evelyn, surrounded by the calm beauty of her new life, met his fury with a serene composure that surprised even herself. "Daniel," she replied, her voice steady and clear, "I left you a letter, a very clear letter. And as for not telling you, I overheard your plans for Cedar Grove, for selling my home, and for taking my assets to fund your own desires. Your inheritance, as you call it, was based on my death or incapacitation, neither of which occurred." She paused, allowing her words to sink in. "I am living here among friends, building a life I enjoy. I am financially secure, thanks to Arthur's foresight, and as documented by a psychologist, I am entirely mentally competent. My decisions are my own." She looked him directly in the eye. "Our relationship, Daniel, if it is to continue at all, will now depend on you accepting me as an independent woman, capable of making her own decisions, and respecting those decisions, whether you like them or not." The relationship remained inevitably awkward. The chasm of betrayal was too deep to bridge easily. But Evelyn, ever the matriarch, maintained regular, discreet contact with Clara and Ethan. She sent them birthday cards, called on holidays, and occasionally met them for lunch when they were in college, away from their parents' influence. That bond, fragile yet precious, she worked to keep untainted by the bitterness of her past. Looking in the mirror now, Evelyn saw a different woman. The lines around her eyes were softer, etched not by worry, but by laughter. Her shoulders were no longer slumped with the weight of expectation, but held upright with quiet strength. She smiled more readily, a genuine, radiant smile that reached her eyes. She had found her power, found her voice, and in doing so had truly found herself. The useless old woman Daniel had hurled a turkey platter at was gone, replaced by Evelyn, a woman reclaimed, resilient, and utterly free.